Hey everyone! This is a quick reminder to subscribe and hit that like button. It lets me know that you are enjoying my content. Also, feel free to drop your suggestions for future stories in the comments below. Thank you for listening, and let's dive right in. Ohio. Home sweet home. I never really thought much about it before, but people here are a bit weird. Not weird like run for your life weird, but more like wears socks with sandals and talks to their cornfield like it's an old friend weird. But who am I to judge? What I didn't expect was ending up at a KFC in Ohio, of all places. I mean, it's just a fast food joint, right? But after I got laid off from my old job, I needed something quick. A friend of a friend got me in, claiming it was normal. Yeah, normal. I should have known something was off the minute they handed me the manual. Rick, the manager, was the first red flag. He was this lanky, greasy guy with a yellowed tooth smile that looked way too eager to meet me. He shook my hand with a grip that was both too firm and too damp, and then handed me a small stapled-together booklet with KFC's training manual on the front. "Well, there is this secret menu thing," Rick said with a lazy wave of his hand, "but nothing to worry about. You'll get used to it quick." Secret menu? I mean, I knew places like McDonald's had them, so it made sense KFC might too. But something about the way he said it felt off, like he was testing me. I flipped open the manual and started skimming. It seemed weird, not like Ohio weird, like something is wrong here weird. The first rule wasn't too bad. 1. Never serve a secret menu meal after midnight without checking the clock. Alright, sure. Maybe it was some weird promotional gimmick. Then I got to the next one. 2. Never touch the golden bucket. The golden what now? I flipped the page, brow furrowed. 3. Never serve the bone-deep special. 4. Never serve the red sauce. I paused. If we're not supposed to serve these things, why even have them on the menu? Just take them off. Seems easier, doesn't it? Then I hit the last rule. 5. If someone asks for 3 drumsticks, give them only 2. So, we're ripping off customers now? Not exactly what I expected from KFC, but hey, rules are rules, I guess. I glanced back up at Rick. "Will do, sir," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. Rick's grin stretched wider, like I'd passed some kind of secret test. "Good," he said. "Then welcome to the chicken team." I forced a polite, nervous smile, because he looked like he was waiting for one, like he had just made the joke of the year, and I needed to laugh. I didn't. The first few shifts were normal. I got the hang of things pretty quickly. The recipes were easy to remember. The place smelled good, greasy, sure, but in a comfort food kind of way. Most of my coworkers seemed normal enough too. Then there was Amanda. Amanda and I hit it off pretty fast. She was a few years older than me, sharp-tongued but easy to talk to. Rick started pairing us up a lot, probably because we worked well together. Everything felt fine. And honestly, after a couple of weeks, I forgot about the manual. Until I asked Amanda about the rules. It had been about 2 weeks since I started. We were mid-shift, wrapping burgers at the prep station. "Hey," I said casually, flipping a bun onto the wrapper. "What's up with those weird rules in the manual?" Amanda stopped mid-wrap. I mean, completely stopped, hands hovering over the food like she had just forgotten how to function. She turned to me slowly. "Oh, Lana," she sighed. "We follow those. No questions asked." I frowned. "Yeah, but like, no one's explained anything to me. Don't you think I need to know why to actually follow them?" Amanda gave me a look. "A weird one." "I haven't seen anything myself," she admitted, "but people say not following the rules can be really bad." I raised an eyebrow. "Bad how?" She hesitated. "Last time it happened, Rick was working the shift." Amanda grabbed another wrapper and started working again, like she didn't want to keep talking. I pressed. "And?" She sighed. "A guy broke a rule. Ambulance took him away. That was 2 months ago." That threw me off. "An ambulance?" I asked. She just nodded. That didn't make sense. This was KFC, not some demonic summoning circle. I shook my head. It's still weird to have a secret menu and all these creepy rules. Like, isn't Ohio weird enough? Amanda chuckled. "Amen to that." She dropped the conversation there, and I let it go. For the time being. Monday night, 11:48 p.m. That was when he came in. And by he, I mean the dude in nothing but underwear. Now I've seen my fair share of weird customers. But this guy took the whole damn cake. Barefoot, middle of winter, looking me dead in the eye. He walked right up to the counter and said, "A bucket of Inferno red chicken, please." I froze, because I knew that was a secret menu item. My fingers hovered over the register. Instinct kicked in. I was about to ring him up when Amanda shoved me aside. "Sorry," she said, voice weirdly calm. "We're closing. No more orders tonight." I blinked. "Amanda, we have 10 minutes left." She gave me a look. The kind that said, "Shut up now, or you'll regret it." And suddenly I remembered rule number 1. Never serve a secret menu meal after midnight without checking the clock. The guy didn't argue, didn't yell, didn't complain, didn't even blink. He just turned around and walked out. Straight out the doors and into the cold, like he was never there to begin with. Amanda exhaled, turned to me and said, "Rule 1, Lana." I just nodded. I wasn't in the mood to argue anymore. The next morning, Rick called me into his office. When I walked in, he was sitting at his desk, spinning his chair toward me. He wasn't smiling. "I heard you almost broke a rule," he said. I blinked. "Sorry, forgot about those." Rick stood up, slowly. He looked me dead in the eye. "We don't forget those," he mocked. I clenched my jaw. Fury bubbled up. Well, maybe I'd remember if someone actually explained what the hell they're for. Rick didn't say anything. He just turned his computer screen toward me. Security footage. Timestamp 11:48 p.m. I saw myself standing at the register. Alone. No half-naked man. No customer at all. I swallowed. "That's..." Rick tilted his head. "Does this make you want to follow the rules?" I stared at the screen. Amanda pushing me aside, talking to empty air. I took a step back and nodded. Rick's yellowed grin returned. "Great," he said. "Now chop chop, back to work." And just like that, I was dismissed. Amanda saw me walk out, pale-faced. "You believe now?" she asked. I didn't answer, because I didn't need to. After that morning in Rick's office, I didn't ask questions anymore. Not about the secret menu. Not about the rules. Not about what the hell I saw on that screen. Because I knew what I saw, and what I saw was nothing. The guy in underwear wasn't there. Not on the footage. Not in reality, according to the security cameras. But I remembered him. I remembered the way his bare feet slapped against the tile. I remembered the sharpness of his voice when he ordered. I remembered how my skin crawled the second he walked in. I remembered how Amanda shoved me aside before I could ring him up. And most of all, I remembered how he left without a single complaint. Like he had never really been there at all. I started watching the clock more after that. Not just out of paranoia, but because I knew, deep down, I had been seconds away from breaking rule number 1. Never serve a secret menu meal after midnight without checking the clock. And now I didn't even want to know what would have happened if I had. A week passed. Things felt normal again. Amanda and I were back to working our shifts together. The customers were their usual Ohio brand weird, and the fryers smelled just as greasy and artery-clogging as ever. But then, he came back, same half-naked man, same vacant stare, same calm, eerie presence that sent shivers down my spine. 11:48 p.m. He walked in exactly like before, barefoot and silent. He approached the counter, not looking at me, not blinking. Then, in the exact same tone as last time, he said, "A bucket of Inferno red chicken, please." My blood ran cold. I felt Amanda stiffen beside me. For a second I panicked. Because this time, Amanda wasn't pushing me away. She was standing perfectly still, waiting. She wanted to see if I had learned my lesson. And I had. I didn't touch the register. I didn't move. I forced my lips shut. The man didn't move either. Didn't shift. Didn't frown. Didn't react at all. We just stood there. Then, just like before, he turned on his heel and walked out. No argument. No complaints, not even a flicker of frustration. And the second he was gone, Amanda let out a breath she had been holding. She turned to me. "Good," she muttered. "You learn fast." The next morning, Rick called me into his office again. This time, I walked in knowing exactly why. He spun his chair toward me, giving me that wide, yellow-toothed grin. "You did good last night," he said. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Rick leaned forward, resting his elbows on his desk. "You're starting to understand, aren't you?" I swallowed hard. "I don't know what I understand," I admitted. "But I know one thing. I don't want to know what happens when we break the rules." Rick's grin widened. "Smart girl," he murmured. "Now get back to work, Lana." I turned and left his office without another word. This time, Amanda didn't need to ask if I believed. It had been about a month since the underwear guy. The rules still lingered in my head, but after that last close call, I had managed to go a few weeks without running into another one. Until I found the golden bucket. It was a normal shift, or as normal as this place ever got. Amanda and I were prepping for the dinner rush, chopping up tomatoes, organizing bags, making sure the kitchen wasn't a complete disaster. I had just finished dicing when the knife slipped. Sharp. Fast. It tumbled out of my hand, clattering against the tile floor. "Shit," I muttered, watching it skid across the kitchen and right into the storage room. "Of course." I sighed, wiping my hands on my apron before heading over to grab it. The storage room door was open, just slightly, enough that I could see the dim, flickering light inside. I leaned down, reaching for the knife, but my hand froze, because in the far corner of the storage room, tucked behind a rack of supplies, was something I had never seen before. A bucket. Not just any bucket, it was gold. Not metallic gold, not some cheap plastic gimmick, but glowing, rich, golden, like it had been carved straight from light itself. I swallowed. I knew what it was. I knew what rule number 2 said. Never touch the golden bucket. I should have left it alone. I should have walked away. But I didn't, because something about it called to me. My hand moved before I could stop it. I picked up the lid, and the moment I did, my stomach turned. Inside was chicken, or at least it used to be chicken. Now, it was moving, twitching, squirming like it was alive. The pieces looked raw, but somehow half-fried at the same time. Muscles twitched, bones shifted, like they were trying to form something. I snapped the lid back on, backed away, didn't say a word, didn't breathe. I forced myself to walk out of the storage room to go back to work like nothing happened. But for the rest of the night, something was off. First, the customers. They were acting strange, too quiet, too still. They ordered their food, but then they just stood there, staring, like they were waiting for something. Then there was Amanda. At first, I thought she was fine. Then she started laughing. Not a normal laugh, not a giggle, but a full-bodied hysterical laugh that wouldn't stop. She stood there, shaking, wrapping burgers with tears in her eyes, and she kept going, for 30 minutes straight. I tried to talk to her. I tried to get her to snap out of it, but nothing worked. Until Rick walked in. He took one look at her, then turned to me and said, "Never touch the golden bucket again, unless you want to join the fried chicken." Amanda's laughter stopped immediately. She turned, eyes still damp, face still twisted from laughing, but silent now. I stared at Rick, stared at Amanda, and suddenly, I had a feeling. I hadn't just seen something I wasn't supposed to see. I had let something out, and Rick knew. It had been a few days since I touched the golden bucket. Things weren't exactly normal, but they were quiet. Amanda still hadn't mentioned what happened that night. Rick acted like it never happened at all. And me? I was just trying to get through my shift. I was working the counter alone when she walked in. Thin, frail, barely standing. She looked sick. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes were too dark. Not brown, not black, just void. She approached the counter slowly, placing a single trembling hand on the surface. And then, in a voice that barely sounded human, she whispered, "The Bone Deep Special." I felt my heart drop. Rule number 3. Never serve the Bone Deep Special. I opened my mouth, tried to say something, anything. But the words got caught, because I could feel it. Something was wrong. I forced a shaky breath and nodded. "Coming right up," I lied, because I wasn't gonna make it. I didn't care how weak she looked. I wasn't about to break another rule. I turned to start preparing something else, anything to hand her instead. But then, my eyes caught something. A box, sitting at my station, labeled Bone Deep Special. My stomach tightened. I hadn't made that. Amanda hadn't made that. It hadn't been there before. I turned back to the woman. She was still staring at me, unblinking, waiting. I swallowed hard and grabbed the box, walked to the trash, threw it in. I turned back, and the box was sitting at my station again, right where it had been before. I blinked, shook my head. No, that wasn't possible, but there it was, like it had never moved at all. I stared at it, hand shaking, my mind racing. I knew better than to open it. I knew better. But my hands moved anyway. Slow, careful. I lifted the lid, and inside was nothing, just the meal I had been making before. Not the Bone Deep Special. Not anything unnatural, just normal food. I frowned. Someone must have packed it wrong, right? I exhaled, grabbed the box, and walked back to the counter, slid it into a bag, handed it to the woman. She took it, and then she changed. Her face twisted, bones shifted, cracking, snapping into new shapes, and suddenly, she wasn't a woman anymore. She was a chicken. A whole, raw, plucked chicken. standing right there in front of me. I screamed. Amanda's head snapped toward me. Lana, are you? Then she saw her. Her eyes went wide. The chicken, the woman. She turned and walked right out the door, like nothing had happened, like she had never been there at all. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Amanda was silent. For the rest of the night, neither of us said a word, but we both knew something was very, very wrong. By now, I had stopped wondering if the rules were real. I knew they were. I had seen a man who didn't exist on camera. I had touched a bucket that shouldn't have been there. I had handed food to a woman who turned into a chicken. So when it came to rule number 4, I thought I'd never break it. Until I did. And someone melted right in front of me. It started like any other shift. Dinner rush was over and I was cleaning the counter, watching customers trickle in and out. That's when I saw him, one of our regulars. A guy who had been coming in for as long as I had worked here, nothing strange about him. Just some middle-aged guy who always ordered the same thing. But that day he asked for extra red sauce. I wasn't thinking, I wasn't paying attention. I just grabbed a couple of sauce packets and tossed them into his bag. And that's when it happened. Right in front of me, he opened a packet, squeezed some onto his fingers. And then, his skin started melting. Not like a burn, not like something bubbling or peeling away. No, it melted like the sauce was fusing with him. His fingers stretched, twisted, pulling apart like they were being swallowed by the sauce itself. He let out a horrible, gut-wrenching scream. Customers turned. Amanda rushed forward. I grabbed him, dragging him toward the bathroom, my brain scrambling for anything to do. I yanked him toward the sink, shoved his hands under the faucet. The sauce wouldn't wash off. It just spread like it was sinking deeper into his skin. His fingers, or what was left of them, were dripping off in thick red globs. I was screaming. He was screaming. Amanda was on the phone calling for an ambulance. I didn't know what else to do, and then it stopped. He stared at his hands, what was left of them. Or, no, that was impossible, because his fingers were back. Perfectly normal, like they had never melted at all, like nothing had happened. I stepped back. My stomach turned. Amanda was white as a sheet. The paramedics came. They took him away. Didn't ask questions, didn't even seem surprised. That was almost worse. Later that night, I was in Rick's office. He was watching the footage, over and over again. Then he turned to me. I don't know, Lana, he said, leaning back in his chair. I just knew I had to add this to the rules. Seemed to be the problem with the sauce, not the dude. I stared at him. Not the dude? Rick looked at me, dead serious. Yeah, because guess what? He said. The guy, he had regrown his fingers before. My breath hitched. I didn't move, didn't speak. Rick just shook his head. I thought it was the sauce, he muttered. Now I know it's the people. My stomach twisted. I stood up, backing toward the door. Rick didn't stop me, just smiled. That same yellow grin. Get back to work, Lana, he said. And that was the end of it. Or at least, it should have been. Because now I couldn't stop thinking about it. The red sauce. The man, and the rules that weren't just meant to protect us. They were meant to keep something contained. By this point, I wasn't just following the rules, I was clinging to them. Because now, I knew what happened when you broke them. So when I saw rule number 5 in the manual again, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to follow it, I was going to avoid it entirely. Because if someone asked for 3 drumsticks, they weren't getting any. It was a late shift when it happened. A family walked in, a father and 2 little kids. They looked normal enough. The dad was smiling, talking softly to his kids as they peered up at the menu. He stepped up to the counter and said, "I'll take 3 drumsticks." I felt my heart stop. Rule number 5. If someone asks for 3 drumsticks, give them only 2. I swallowed, forced myself to smile. "I'm so sorry," I lied. "We're actually out of drumsticks right now. Would you like wings or crispy strips instead?" The dad didn't even blink. "Sure," he said. "A mix of both would be fine." Crisis avoided, or so I thought. A few minutes later, I walked over to their table with their order. "Here you go," I said, smiling at the kids. They grinned back, already digging into the food. I turned back toward the counter, and then I heard it. A scream. I spun around. One of the little kids had dropped their drumstick, staring at it, eyes wide with horror. How the hell was there a drumstick? The father gasped, stood up so fast his chair scraped against the tile. Then they ran, all 3 of them, just bolted out of the restaurant. Didn't stop to explain, didn't even grab their food, just sprinted into the night. Amanda was already rushing toward me. "What happened?" she asked, breathless. I didn't answer. I already knew. I stepped closer, looked down at the discarded drumstick, and froze. Because sticking out from the half-eaten meat was a finger, a human finger, where the bone should have been. My breath caught in my throat. Amanda was right beside me now. She saw it too. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us moved. Then, in a voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it, Amanda whispered, "Is this what Rick meant about the golden bucket?" I didn't answer. Because suddenly, I wasn't sure if I wanted to know.